Well, we are really lucky today to be joined by Neil Mullarkey. First thing I'm going to go through, Neil, is your kind of official background, and then we're going to have a little bit of fun on one of the skits that you did, which I absolutely love. So, what is Neil's official background? Well, he started off by studying economics and social sciences at Cambridge University. Neil is one of the most experienced and accomplished improv performers in the world. If you check him out on YouTube, you will see a whole host of skits. If you're familiar with Whose Line Is It Anyway, Neil was a pretty prominent member of that group when it was in the UK. So I highly encourage you to check that out. Neil has then taken his experience with improv and applied it to the real world, in the business world. And he consults with multinational companies such as Google, Ernst& Young, Deloitte, a whole host of companies that Neil would work with, taking those improv skills and basically teaching people how that could be applied in the real world. He is the co-founder of the Comedy Store Players, Europe's top improv troupe, which he founded with none other than Mike Myers. Now, we all know Mike Myers in Canada. Mike is from Toronto, Ontario, more specifically from Scarborough. And we are very familiar and are huge fans, obviously, of Mike Myers and all the work that he's done on Saturday Night Live and many of the shows that he's done afterwards, which we're going to talk about one in a minute. And the other thing that Neil has authored several books, the most recent one being a book called In the Moment. And I would highly recommend this book to any business professional. Again, we're going to talk in detail about many of the things in this book, but at the end of the day, what Neil is trying to convey with this book is to take the skills of improv, and really what improv is how to deal with people and how to apply those in a working environment. And then he takes it even further about talking about an environment that encourages creativity, when to use humor in the workforce. How to be a good leader. And then the other thing with this book as well is that it was written in the middle of and shortly after the pandemic, where everybody was working from home, how to have more effective Zoom meetings, how to effective team meetings, how to spice up it's a really good book. And I would highly encourage you to take a read of it. You will certainly walk away with many tips on just how to be a better worker and how to have more fun with your job as well. That's what it's all about. So, but Neil, the first thing I have to start with is the scene that you did with Mike Myers, and I got to tee this up a little bit. I got to give people a little bit of perspective, because Neil, when I first reached out to you, I had no idea that you actually acted in this movie. It was news to me when I started Googling your name and actually realized the scene that you had played. But I need to set this up properly, because in my household, or should I say my wife's household, the kids have one requirement, really, if they want to live in this house after the age of 12, once they hit teenager. All right. And really what that is that there's 5 movies that they must watch. So if they want to live in this house as a teenager, there's 5 must-watch movies that are on my list. Okay. First one is, again, another one by a Canadian, Michael J. Fox, Back to the Future's Part 1 and Part 2. Fantastic movie. No requirement for the kids to watch number 3. However, Part 1 and Part 2 are definitely must if you want to live in this household as a teenager. Second or third one, as we get into the list here, is Star Wars. I'm a big Star Wars fan. Not specific on exactly what Star Wars movie the kids have to watch. They have to watch one of them. If they're not hooked on one of the Star Wars movies, it probably means that they might have been switched at birth. It's probably going to raise more concerns. But at the end of the day, Star Wars is a must-watch. And then, of course, one of the best horror movies ever produced is Jaws. I've probably seen Jaws a couple hundred times. Again, that's another one of these must-watches. So there's 4 of the movies right there. Now, what is number 5? Number 5 is where Neil Mullarkey comes into play. Austin Powers' International Man of Mystery. One of the best comedies that you'll ever watch. Now, if you're a James Bond fan, you will absolutely love Austin Powers' International Man of Mystery, because it is very much a play on James Bond. And Neil Mullarkey was actually not only just part of this movie, but contributed to and was responsible for one of the funniest parts in the entire movie, which I'm going to talk about right now. So again, the first thing I have to do is kind of tee this up properly, Neil, is In this movie, Austin Powers was a super spy who was chronogenically frozen for a number of years. He emerged from his freezing in order to assist with a mission, and he was then teamed with Elizabeth Hurley. So you can imagine Austin Powers and Elizabeth Hurley then coming up and seeing Neil and wanting to collect Austin Powers' personal effects. So Neil was there and was slowly pulling out each of Austin Powers' personal effects. And many of them are what you would expect. And then all of a sudden, we got to one particular personal effect, which caused some level of embarrassment for Austin Powers. And that was a Swedish-made penis enlarger pump. Now, Austin Powers first said that it wasn't his, and you slowly produced more evidence, which indicated that it absolutely did belong to Austin Powers. So I will say, Neil, it was a great part of the movie. It may have been the funniest part in the whole movie. You have actually acted in additional Austin Power movies since then. But let's just start with that point. And the first question would be, how could you possibly keep a straight face? And like, how many takes did they have to do to avoid you from laughing? Because you were perfect. There was not even a crack of a smile during the course of that part.
Well, thank you. Of course, I laughed when I read it. In fact, Mike Myers sent me the script quite a long time in advance saying, this is what I'm thinking of doing. Sometimes I send the script out to people kind of, this is the sort of thing I should do. And I said, you actually make that movie. And Demi Moore's production company said, yeah, we'll make it. And Mike said, who should we get to play Mrs. Kensington? I said, you should get Elizabeth Hurley.
That was your idea. Wow.
She was famous because she was with Hugh Grant when 4 Weddings and a Funeral came out. And I said, she's English, beautiful, and she can do funny. And I'm sure she would be perfect. And luckily they got her. So then I got the part. And of course, Austin Powers, not a very big name at that time. Nobody had heard of Austin Powers.
Yeah.
Unlike Wayne of Wayne's World,
Yep.
which was following up some years of success on the TV, Austin Powers, nobody heard of. And you're right. If you don't know James Bond, you had to sort of work out what was going on in some respects. And so Austin Powers didn't have a big budget, to be perfectly frank. So we didn't have much time to do it. We did it in one day. And in fact, I think we started shooting at 4 p.m. I'd been there all day while they were doing other stuff with Michael York and other people as he was coming out of being cryogenically frozen and having that very long pee, if you remember.
Yeah, I remember.
Pause, then even more. And they're just kind of looking at number 2. And so I don't have much time to do it. But actually, in the movies, you tend to have a long time where somebody's shooting somebody else. And you're just doing your line. So I could do my line multiple times. I think they might have shot Mike first anyway. So they're doing Mike single and Mike double with Elizabeth Hurley. So she had to stop from laughing. So by the time it got to me, I think I'd heard the lines many times.
I see.
It wasn't too bad to keep a straight face. Nevertheless, I think I was booked by Mike, with whom I used to work in London, in doing a double act called Mullarkey and Myers, because I had met him. He was selling tickets for a show I was in. He was just a guy. But he'd heard of the group I was in. So he came and knocked on the door of the theatre and said, Cambridge Footlights, this is Monty Python and many others. Can I do something? And they said, oh, who are you? Just paint the set, sell tickets. I got talking to him and discovered he'd come from Second City, the touring company of Second City in Canada. Wow, Second City heroes to me, because I'd heard of Saturday Night Live, but particularly this movie, The Blues Brothers.
Oh, yeah.
John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd. I wanted to find out where they came from. I found out Saturday Night Live. I found out Second City. But I didn't know they did improv. Anyway, so Mike got me over for this movie. And all I had to be basically was kind of a condescending English person with maybe a raised eyebrow here and there. I probably had 5 lines or something out there. I had to remember them in the right order. Because get them right. It was Swedish-made penis enlarger, credit card receipt. And when he says this sort of thing, ain't my bag, baby, then I finally produced the book. Yes. Swedish-made penis enlarger me. This sort of thing is my bag, baby. And then they walk away, and I do some stuff in the background, waving the Swedish-made enlarger. And the director, Jay Roach, lovely, lovely man. And so he was very sensitive to the fact I was just in for a day. Hard to do that as an actor. Everyone's kind of know each other. Everyone's joking with the sound crew and the props person. So he made me feel very comfortable, because you can fall over, you can go to pieces if it's, it's high pressure. When it's turning over, there's millions of dollars at stake, and
Yep.
I'd had to wait all day. So I probably wasn't, and I was a bit jet lagged as well. So I may not have been my best, but luckily it worked. And as you say, people remember that scene a great deal. I tend to tell them not to Google it because of the word involved. But people remember that scene fondly because it was sort of perfectly written. And that was the point. We're going to talk about improv later. Mike is a brilliant improviser, but he uses improv techniques to create written material. And that's where I would say Jay Roach is a great director, because Mike had a script. We do the script, and then when I was sitting in on some other scenes, Mike was improvising a little bit. But it's a different skill to be able to write a movie. That's a big deal. Write a movie. That's a big deal. I just turn up at the Comedy Store in London on a Sunday, and we ask the audience for suggestions, and we make up silly sketches. So that's a very different skill. Whereas Mike has written multiple movies and TV shows. So he really has got an extremely powerful work ethic, and he's the sort of person who'll write and rewrite and edit. And that's something to be admired. And I would say in business, organizations sometimes mistake, is this something to write, rewrite, work on our strategy, our presentations? Or is it something where actually we need to talk to our clients, customers, coaching, which needs more of an improv approach? And what I find people often make a mistake is they've got a presentation coming up. Oh, I'll just, improvise it. And it goes on too long. It's waffly. It's boring. And it's because they were too scared to rehearse and write it. So if you're the chief executive, really work hard, even if it's only 10 minutes, but if it's a town hall, to make that 10 minutes live. If you're talking, on the other hand, to people trying to work out how you can relate to them, how excited they are to meet you, clients, customers, people in other worlds, you want to be much more improv, listening, rolling with the punches, riffing. And these are two different skills. And of course, I can teach presentation skills as well, but people are surprised. I say, you've got to nail your script, get your bullet points, make sure it doesn't overrun, make sure you got a good start. Don't just waffle. Don't just fall into it. But here's the first slide. Anyway, That's a long answer to your question. It's a great joy to me to be involved with Austin Powers. And I found it's a passport wherever I am in the world. When I say I'm that guy, people just smile, which is so lovely.
Did you, and one other question on that, could you have ever thought, did you think the movie would be this big? Like, did you think it's like you say, it was a nichey kind of thing. It was a brand new thing. Nobody knew, everyone knew Wayne's World. Nobody knew Austin Powers. Did you think it would blow up to be what it is, and three more movies, and there's a rumor of potentially another one coming down the pipe? Would you ever thought it would be the play would play out?
No, and I don't know if Mike thought that either, because basically it celebrates his English heritage. So that you've got the James Bond, and there's a strong nod to the Carry On movies. Carry On. I don't know if people have heard of these. These are very British, saucy postcard humor. So often people on holiday on these postcards, there's a slightly dodgy, which we would think is politically incorrect now, man and woman. There are those kind of things, or what's going on, somebody's lost some clothes or whatever. Postcard humor, but also these Carry On movies, which were full of puns, full of lascivious women and men, people are failing in their, shall we say, sexual antics. So I thought that's going to appeal to me, but how many people will it appeal to? And then Mike said he did Austin Powers in LA at the Groundlings, which is an improv theater. So he did a few shows trying to get the character. And then I think they played in LA a part of LA that's not predominantly English speaking. They played Austin Powers there, and they didn't have the required reading. They maybe didn't know James Bond. They may not have known the silly puns that British people like. And it didn't do well at all, the previews. Wow. But New Line said, we don't care. The guy in charge said, I don't care. I'm gonna do it anyway.
Wow.
And I think Mike persuaded Virgin Atlantic, Richard Branson, to use the character on a big billboard in Sunset. And the movie just went bigger than you might have imagined. And so that is a surprise, I guess. But I would say Mike always tries, although he's not going to overlook the general audience, he knows if you're trying to please everybody, you'll fail. But if you find a sensibility, you will actually mine deeper gold or gold than you expected. And so it was just silly. And he's very strong on visual as well, so it could play perhaps anywhere. And Jay really got that, made
Yeah.
the visual jokes work, of which there are many, and just taking all the cliches we know about movies that everyone could appreciate. So yeah, I didn't expect that perhaps, but in hindsight, maybe I should have done.
Yeah. Well, congratulations again. It's clearly it's something to be really, really proud of. Like again, like the impact it's had. And again, the part that you play, if it's not the funniest part in the whole movie, it is certainly on the top 5 list. It is because, like you say, there is a ton of really funny parts in that movie. So that is it would be tough to come down to a top 5, but yours is definitely on that list, if not number 1. So it is awesome. So maybe the first part then is we talked about how things are. We take a movie, it's scripted, everything plays out. Is one form of comedy. Maybe give people a little bit of a history lesson now on improv. Where did improv come from, and how is it so different from, call it like a scripted movie like Austin Powers, where you're given a script, you got to stick to the script, you got to stay on it. What's the history of improv, and how is it, and why is it so different from, say, like another form of comedy, like in a movie or something like that?
Improv started in the 1920s in Chicago. It was a social worker. She wasn't trying to make theater, much less comedy. She was just working with children, deprived children, inner city children, maybe not native speakers. And she was trying to give them confidence to speak up, to feel that they could communicate and want to communicate. And so she said, I wasn't creating exercises, I was solving problems. And it was her son who saw the exercises and thought, hey, these could work as a form of theatre. So with some other actors, developed it over years. And eventually that gave rise to Second City in Chicago, 1959. And they'd worked hard to get an ethos, which we in the world now we called yes and, which is yes, I hear what you say, and I build on that. And of course, audience were delighted by this. And it's a very different delight from watching a scripted piece, whether it's stand-up, a movie, or theatre, where the writers have, and the rehearsal and the director, they've made it into something that works really well. Improv is the very opposite, is we say, hey, we don't have a script, give us a suggestion. So whilst it is in the theatre and uses people's imagination, when, oh, right, we're in a princess's lair, we're on the top of a mountain, we're going back 100 years without props and costume or scenery, we're using that same audience imagination. But much of the thing, when people say to me, but isn't that scary?
Yeah.
I saw the other day on LinkedIn, so I didn't realize that you'd say stand-up is more scary than improv. Stand-up's terrifying. You're on your own. You've written it. They're judging you. It could go horribly down the toilet. Whereas improv is, if there are moments when you don't know what to say, you just go, and the audience loves it because they know, you're laughing now because they know that's what's real, and you're okay with it. And as I say to people I train, as long as you're still breathing and smiling, you're fine. They're judging you by completely different standards. An actor who goes on in a scripted play and goes, they haven't learned their lines. They failed to do what they ought. An improviser who confidently says, I don't know what I'm going to say, but together we, the audience and the actors, will create something wonderful. That's a different thing completely. And in fact, people say to me, I think they're tired after watching an improv show. They're laughing a lot. Their cheeks ache, but there's more pressure. There's more tension. Will they?
Absolutely.
Won't they? Will they fall over? And of course, like the magician or the juggler who fails the first time, so that when they get it right, we go, oh, wow. It's kind of like that. We're constantly reminded that we're fallible. We're teetering on the edge of failure. But actually, the audience likes to see us, I believe, because they see us working together. They see us enjoying not knowing. There's great delight in people being vulnerable and being fallible and trying stuff and not knowing what they're going to say. And we often giggle at ourselves because I didn't know what I was going to say. Where did that come from? And the pauses. Sometimes the pause is the funniest thing. Or the audience is ahead of you because they filled in the gap. So it's a very different feeling. Now, on the other hand, Mike is a brilliant improviser. So he often co-writes. So the the co-writing is similar to improv. I say something, you pick it up, you run with it, you throw it back to me. Hey, that works. Especially comedy quite likes co-writing because is she going to smile, your comedy partner? Is he getting it? Yeah. Oh, no, he's jumping in with something brilliant. And that is something akin to improv, which is you offer something up, don't know where it's going to work, see where it goes. I got a feeling it might lead somewhere. Yes, it has. Great. So the things are not entirely separate. And I even would dare say that many writers who write on their own, they're playing that in their own head. They've got two voices. And something pops up. The character says this. Yeah, okay. Well, I don't know where it came from. So that creativity that we were kind of talking about before we started, which is where did it come from? I don't know. And I think Ian Forster, I said, various people say things like, I don't know what I think until I see what I write.
Yeah.
And often people say when they're writing a novel or whatever, or a play, the characters start to tell you what they're thinking and feeling. And that makes no sense. You've created the characters, but actually after a while they talk to you, they have their own life, and your job is to maybe get out of the way and let it just emerge and be okay with the fact that you're not in conscious control sometimes of where it might lead. Some writers will know everything that's going to happen. Some, they may know the start. Everyone has their own way of doing it, but they will tell you there are good times and bad. And what's joyous about improv for me is I'm never alone. I'm always with my gang, the Comedy Store players or elsewhere. Somebody else is on stage with me, which I love. Stand-up's quite lonely.
How did you get involved in improv? What's your history with like you roll the clock back? Obviously, you have a long relationship with Mike Myers, but how did you first get involved with improv?
Because of him.
Oh, really?
I was at the Cambridge Footlights, very scripted sketches. You do them, you try them out in front of a student audience. You rewrite them. You try them for late night students, a whole sketch show. Then you try them in the mainstream theatre. Then you tour them. Then you take to the Edinburgh Festival. So by the end, it's scripted 110%. So this was the show Mike came to see at the theatre I was playing in West London, and he started talking about Second City. Oh, great, Second City. And then he said, they're not just scripted. They do scripted shows, but they also do improv. Really? Because I'd heard about improv. A friend of mine went to see a show at the Edinburgh Festival, and she said they were asking the audience for suggestions, and then they used those suggestions to make theatre. I said, oh, they were cheating. They must have been. They take a suggestion of the car, and, oh, I was in the car the other day on the way to the supermarket, and they must have had a supermarket sketch. No. She said, and she was kind of a bit apologetic. She was sorry that she'd failed to see how they were cheating. And then Mike started talking to me about all the things that the ethos that's emerged over 100 years of this form of theatre, actually, about listening, accepting offers. So whatever she says, your fellow player, he says is an offer. Build on that, accept it, throw them back an offer that builds their idea. Endowing somebody. So a scene is boring if I go, hi, who are you? I'm Scott. Who are you? I'm a thing. If I go, Scott, I can't believe it. You got out of jail.
Yeah.
We have a story. It's
exactly.
And I've endowed you. And of course you're going to, yes, I got out of jail. I'm going to find who sent me there. And I've got a story. You make assumptions, you throw in ideas. And I don't know why you're in jail. But if I say you got out of jail, you've got something to play with. And then you could say, well, I'm glad you got out. Or, hey, you were the prison governor or something. And so you don't have to write the story. You just write one line at a time, in fact. As Del Close, who was one of the gurus of Second City, said, don't try to write the scene on your own. Just bring a brick. And together we will build a cathedral. And that's what, to me, is the joy of improv. Why it's so transferable to any human endeavor, which requires collaboration. So anyway, Mike was sitting there. I said, why are you here in UK? Well, my parents are British. I love Monty Python and Peter Sellers, the English actor. Right. So what are you doing? Well, I'm writing sketches. No. Nobody does sketches. It's all stand-up now. All stand-up. So let's go see some. And then we'd go and see some comedy. And then he did that thing, if you remember, where he goes down behind a sofa as if he's going downstairs.
Yeah.
And he did that for me. I'm walking on the sidewalk, the pavement, and he goes the other side of the car. Looks like he's going down. I said, that's so funny. that's the basis of something. So we then spent weeks, months writing a whole sketch based on you can only see the top half of somebody. So he had a sofa, I had some chairs, and everything was. So, for example, if I at the bottom of the screen, people can't see this, but if I put my hand like that, you can see it's like a puppet going across. And there's a character you can only see their head. There's a character I played, but you could only see his feet up in the air. And then there was a bit where I was at the supermarket checkout and I was doing this, and Mike was bringing the stuff at the bottom over the top of the sofa. We just spent ages thinking of jokes and then trying to write a story around it. And this was the story of Dr. Wicked, an evil character, and he was invisible, so I had to play him with a tea towel on my head so that he could be seen. So anyway, Mike taught me improv, basically. We were doing a show at the Edinburgh Festival, 1985. There was an American comedian called Kit Hollaback who'd worked with Robin Williams in San Francisco. And they said, hey, why don't we do some improv? Kit and Mike, they'd done improv. Let's get the other guys. And there was a guy called Paul Merton, who's a big comedian now in the UK, and Dave Cohn, a great writer. They said, let's do a show. And so we did 2 a.m. one night at the Edinburgh Festival. Let's just try it. Mike and Kit had taught us for about an hour, and we were terrible. And so by the end, there were fewer in the audience. In fact, the others ran away. Just Mike and me were left. There were about 3 people in the audience. However, they persuaded the Comedy Store here in the UK to let us have Sunday nights. Fridays and Saturdays was stand-up. And actually, nobody knew improv here. This was before Whose Line Is It Anyway? So it wasn't a big deal like it is in North America. And so the first half was stand-up. Mike and I did our double act, which was sketches, really, in the first half sometimes. They had other stand-ups for the first few months. And then the guy who runs the Comedy Store said, I think we just got to go full out. Let's just brand this. It's an improv night. We'll call it Comedy Store Players. Comedy to go. And that's what it is. It's takeaway comedy. It's not a beautifully crafted meal. It's, street food, if you like. And then slowly, we built up an audience. And then Whose Line Is It Anyway really, really helped. Because people didn't understand. Like me, you could make a show without a script, and all you do is ask the audience. That's weird. But they go, oh, I see. And so the host in this country was Clive Anderson. He would ask the audience for suggestions and make the actors use it. So Greg Proops was there, an American, Mike McShane, Josie Lawrence, who's also one of the Comedy Store Players, Ryan Stiles, and Stephen Fry, and Jonathan Price as well, the brilliant actor who had studied improv actually here in the UK. So it gradually built up as a brand, improv. Oh, right. And it was written to our contracts. Whenever we went on Whose Line, we had to say Neil Mullarkey of the Comedy Store Players, Josie Lawrence of the Comedy Store Players. So the host said, that killed 10 seconds of my time, which he wanted to do funny stuff. So gradually, that's how it built. Then Mike went back to Toronto in the 86. I think his father was unwell. He got the chance to perform at the main stage in Toronto. I think it was called Not Based on Anything by Stephen King. That was it. That was the show. And we kept in touch. I came over to Toronto. We did a show at the Rivoli one Sunday afternoon. And all Mike's friends came and he introduced me to this guy who was a friend of his from Second City Workshops, a guy called Dave Foley, Kids in the Hall.
Yeah.
Now tours with Who's Live Anyway with Greg Proops and others. So just stuff like that. Mike really taught me this skill, and I don't know what I would have done because my life took a complete turn there. I thought I'd be Mr. Scripted comedy sketches. And then this improv became addictive, doing it every Sunday, then doing it with other groups. Then at some point, I thought this could be a useful skill to teach people off stage.
So on that question, when did the light bulb, or maybe how did the light bulb go off, Neil, to say, look, you've transitioned now from doing like these more formal scripts into this whole new world of improv. And again, the focus is comedy, performing. The last thing on your mind, presumably, is how this can be applied in a boardroom. But then at some point, and we're going to talk a little bit about creativity, and when a light bulb goes off in your head. But when did the light bulb go off to say, you know what, like I can actually take these skills and apply it in a boardroom? you're living a different life, obviously, than somebody, than a traditional worker who's working in an office space. You're a million miles away from them. But clearly at some point the light bulb went off to say, hey, you know what? We can apply this somewhere else. Like, is there a moment that you remember where you, like an aha moment where you said, you know what? I think this is going to work somewhere else?
Well, my book is called In the Moment. And so I'm talking about in the moment theater. We make it up and it takes seconds. And I said I can have my cake and eat it. Sometimes a moment in your life is 6 months, a year. And so there was a moment in a period, there was a bit of push and pull, I would say, for me, which is a bit of, I'm not sure I want to be doing this when I'm 50, just trawling around the country, doing sketches, going to bed late, feeling a little insecure with the world because who knows where your next gig is coming from, going to auditions, maybe getting it, not getting it, putting together ideas to the BBC, and they can't. The BBC never says no; they just say, so it's kind of, and you don't know, should I take it to another broadcaster? Should I not? What should I do? So it's kind of frustration about, as well as being an actor, looking around on a movie set, thinking the director's job is interesting, and I'm just the actor waiting around, just eating cake because there's so much food on the set. So there was kind of, what do I do with my life? And then gradually sort of hearing that theatre and other arts were used in what it was called management training. And it was one of those things where one Saturday afternoon, they had a convention at the Comedy Store in London about people using and studying comedy beyond the stage. Psychotherapists, psychologists, sociologists, because I'd always been amused about the personal ads in the back of magazines, which always said GSOH, good sense of humor. They might say rich and likes Chinese food or whatever, but good sense of, and I was thinking, what is the evolutionary use of humor? It's not going to build a dam. It's not going to kill the saber-toothed tiger. And gradually, I was looking at comedy as something beyond the stage, off-stage comedy. Why do we like somebody who's funny? Why do we tend to look and listen to that person? And so this afternoon, there was a GP, a doctor, and a comedian I knew called Arnold Brown, and they were doing some stuff together. I wrote to them. I said, can I come play? And we became the Academy of Laughter and Health. So we talked about the advantages of humor. What is so helpful in your life? Because, of course, physically, if you laugh, it's great for the oxygen. Psychologically, mentally, cognitively, things are if you're laughing, you're healthy and probably more creative and getting on with people. And so I gradually sort of dipped my toe in, and the doctor said, you must listen to this guy. He's called Frank Farrelly. He does provocative therapy. What's that? And I listened to it. It was on
That's
a cassette.
an interesting term.
Isn't it? But it was basically a bit like improv. So he'd listen to the client. The client say, I want to give up smoking. And he'd do things like, give up smoking? No, the problem is you're not smoking enough. You need to smoke more. And of course, the client then goes, well, hang on, do I want to give up smoking? What? What's going on? Or you might go, you'll never give up smoking. Look at you. No, there's no way. You've got no chance. And the client goes, actually, yes, I can. And this was a guy who was working with a kind of really high security mental hospital in Madison, Wisconsin, trying this stuff out. And it worked.
Wow.
It was actually helping people because he would say sometimes the therapeutic intervention is, of course you don't like yourself. Of course you don't like life. You know, your family was this, your background is that. Let's see you next week. And we just talk more about your problems rather than looking for a solution. And basically he was doing what improv does, which is a client says, smoking, don't feel good about myself. And then they take a tiny offer and extend it and stylize it and make it funny. And when you're laughing at your problem, you begin to think, maybe I can laugh at my self-limiting beliefs. So I went to see this guy, Frank Farrelly, in Madison, and I started finding out. I went to see him in the Netherlands, and there were coaches there, executive coaches who were learning something called neurolinguistic programming, who would call what provocative therapy, they call it pattern disrupt. So my pattern is, I can't give up smoking. I'm no good. I'm a smoker. I want to give up smoking, but I can't because I'm a smoker. I can't. It's kind of a bit circular. And disrupt that pattern, you get people to think differently. Sometimes the change is actually physical. People laugh. Of course, why do I want to get smoke? Yes, of course I shouldn't smoke more, but what a funny idea. And I gradually kind of started looking around for things that seemed to make sense. A newspaper article about a poet who'd been working at a business school in Oxford. And I wrote to them, I said, a poet? That's very left field. What about me, who teaches people how to listen better, how to have better conversations, more creative conversations? And they go, yeah, that's a good idea. Come along on Sunday evening before we start and create the environment of psychological safety, of playing, of sharing, of trusting, of being open to new ideas and admitting maybe our flaws. And it just kind of grew along that way. So the light bulb was actually slowly realizing that at its basis, improv is about listening, not what you might think. Because you think improv is about being good and funny and pushing aside other people. No, it's about listening and making their idea work. This was somebody, a Financial Times writer said to me in my book, what a radical idea you improv people have, which is make the other person look good. And that's what it is how do I build on her idea? And she's thinking the same about me. So that was it. It was kind of little moments, including a massively famous management consultancy. My wife was at a hen night for a partner. And she said, my husband's just kind of thinking about improv as a thing. And they went, yes, of course. We need that because we've been using actors, Shakespearean actors, to teach you how to use your breath and perform. But the client isn't like an audience at Stratford-upon-Avon. Yeah. They're like a tough crowd at a comedy night. Yeah, exactly. They're shouting things back. They don't read the script. They're kind of saying, what about this? Why haven't you done that? So you've got to roll with the punches. And of course, when you do, the client's even happier because you haven't stuck to your script. You've addressed their concerns. So that was my other big gig, was working with a management consultancy. Another one, by chance, or was it? Saatchi & Saatchi, the advertising agency. I'd been speaking to my voiceover agent because you have different agents for writing, acting, voiceover, whatever. I'd been speaking to her about, this is what I want to do next. I want to teach business people some skills. And I think improv has something about it because it's listening. It's about acknowledging the other person's point of view. It's being okay with not knowing. And for some bizarre reason, this guy, the head of strategy at Saatchi & Saatchi, the ad agency, rang her up because I guess ad agencies talk to voiceover agents because of commercials. And they said, Neil Mullarkey, we like him. We saw him at the Comedy Store. We went down and people said, and come down and see him. Yeah, we like the look of him. We're pitching for the Visa account. Visa is a credit card. Can he come to our office and do 20 minutes stand-up comedy on credit cards? And she rightly said, no, you can't just magic up 20 minutes of stand-up, much less on one topic. But you've come to the right place because Neil is looking at teaching improv as a creative skill. So if you're thinking of creative ways of pitching for this account, of finding ways to unlock meaning, innovation, brand value, use this skill of finding things we didn't expect, innovating in ways that aren't just from the previous script. And that's how it started. I gradually grew my courage. I understood how to run a workshop. I was taught a lot by my students. They would say, oh, this is applicable that way. So the light bulb moment was you know how LED lights come on very slowly? Yep. It was a bit like that. It's kind of, I think it's an idea. And little did I know how much application it had. Then I got a gig at a business school. And they said, you know, there's lots of management leadership theories and models that actually say, whoa. Leadership isn't straight lines. It isn't a script. It isn't just top down. It isn't command and control. It's improvising, shaping things that are emerging. It's dealing with changes that happen. It's not saying, here's the script, let's go out and do it. It's much more akin to what you do. And our job is to teach people as a leader, you're not in control, you are in charge. So how do you corral all these volatile sources, which may be how the market's reacting, how the team are, and how individuals and how team sort of spirit is and how the client changes. All these things are not scripted, and multiple perspectives need to be understood, much like when you're in a scene in improv. You don't know what's the audience is going to say. You don't know what your fellow player is going to say. Anyway, there we go. That's how it started. So it was a light bulb that came on slowly.
So now what you have to do is you need to try and get this into a business framework at least. And what that in many cases means is coming up with an acronym. And you've come up with an acronym, which is an approach on how to deal with this, which is the LASER framework. Maybe just give people a little bit of perspective on then how you take improv and then communicate it out to the business folks in a way that they would understand, and a way that works for them, and how the LASER framework sort of fits into that.
Yeah. Well, LASER was how to do improv, which is listen to your fellow player, accept their offer. If they say, "Good morning, Mr. Johnson," you're Mr. Johnson.
Yeah.
So you send an offer back saying, "Yeah, I'm Mr. Johnson. Can I get you some cheese or whatever?" Then you explore assumptions, which is, why are you coming to Mr. Johnson for cheese? Why today? Why not yesterday? Mike Myers used to say, scenes can be a bit unspecific. Hello, what are you doing? I don't know. There's a thing happening. Yeah, what is it? It's much better to establish who, what, and where. So, and he used to say, why have the gods of improv chosen this moment? Almost say, what's so special about Mr. Johnson? And that person talking to Mr. Why the cheese? Actually, there's a deep meaning as to why the cheese is something. And of course, you find this not by planning, but by giving offers, accepting and sending offers back. So you listen with intent. I'm not just listening to you. I'm hearing and I'm acting on what you said. You said, Mr. Johnson. I'm Mr. Johnson. You said cheese. I'm going to make cheese +2. I love cheese. I hate cheese. My dad was killed by a cheese accident. So you move forward with the other person's idea. You accept the offer and send one back that builds on their idea. Explore assumptions. Did you think this was set in the modern day? No, it's set in Dickensian times. Mr. Scrooge needs some cheese or something. So LASE, and the R is for one which people might not know. I call it recycle or reincorporate, which is, how in a sitcom they have what's called a callback. Seinfeld, Curb Your Enthusiasm. Some object, person, idea, word happens, then it comes again. And then by the end, it could be the most important thing that ruins the plot or means they can kill the dragon or win the day. And of course, when you're making improv, it can just be random, unconnected. But actually, at its deepest, the audience wants story. They want funny, but they want story. They want resolution. They want that seeming coincidence to have meaning. And so a very simple way is just to reincorporate or recycle a thing from earlier. Bring back, that thing. That's the denouement, if you like. So LASER, listen, accept, send offers back, explore your assumptions and recycle. Now, in business, very applicable. Listen to your client. Listen to your suppliers. Listen to your team members. What is it they're saying? What is it they are saying by not saying? Accept that. Okay, they've said it. They may be different from you. They have a different way of expressing it. They may even see the world. Accept it. Don't try and tell them they're wrong. But if you want to persuade them, influence them, work with them, send an offer back, acknowledging how they feel, how they perceive, even sometimes just use words they used. And in the broader sense, the accept is, consumer behavior has changed. Technology has changed. Regulatory frameworks have changed. Accept it. You can't just say, I wish the world hadn't changed, because you'd be sitting in a cave like a hermit then. Then consciously think, how can we use that? Let's send an offer. Let's try and experiment using the change or the development. Then explore assumptions, which is, actually, did we realize we're looking at this from one perspective? Did you, hang on, all right. We just think to sell more things, make it cheaper. Well, hang on. No. Actually find out what things people want. Buy. What are they buying? What are they not doing? What are they change? What's changed? Exploring your assumption of what's going on. And indeed there's like branding. We all know a brand is a set of assumptions. We like this one because they've given us a good product before. We like them because actually we like their commercials. We like that because it's got a nice logo or whatever, or because our dad or mum or friends use it. So, and then we discover they're doing certain things we didn't like. We found an assumption was questioned. And the R for recycle is quite interesting because use what people are doing in the way you service their needs. So what people are talking about, use that to sell them it or to understand or rejig the thing you're offering. Recycle maybe from another world. How many times I've had clients say, we don't want to be the best customer service in our sector. We want to be the best customer service in any sector. We're in housing, but we look to Apple for our customer service levels. If we weren't in hotels, how would we treat our clients? I think Richard Branson with Virgin Atlantic said, there's a little bit of treating passengers on an airplane as they're lucky to be going somewhere. Why don't we treat them as VIPs, everybody? Let's make it comfortable for them. Make it fun. Have little screens that only first class used to have. So the recycle is bring back stuff from before, which is kind of the broader sense of how do we use activities that are happening in the market to our advantage. Another one is how just having a conversation with somebody. Scott, you told me you're from Brampton. Now, someday I'll mention Brampton to you. Just a tiny thing. You care about me listening. If I've shown I've listened to it, even it has just a small thing about how, you said the children, the teenagers in your household must have watched Back to the Future 1 and 2, but not 3. They need to have seen Jaws. They need to know Austin Powers. These things, if I just play them back to you, you go, all right, this person was listening. And that's what I call it, intentive listening. Because hearing is one thing, but I may forget it completely. But if you shared something with me, profound or not, and I then consciously use that in the way I respond to you, you're going to think this is an ally. And I will be an ally because I've seen you, I've understood you, and I want to be seen and understood by you as well.
So the L in the laser framework is by far the most important. Then it all starts with listening. Like if there's one skill that people really need to work on, is your listening skills. Because if you don't have that, nothing else happens, I guess, right? It all starts with the letter L.
Actually, L is the only one, really, because all the others are subservient to that. If you haven't listened, you can't accept and send an offer and explore the assumptions behind what you've heard and reincorporate or recycle what they've said. So L is the big one. A friend of mine in the UK runs an improv group called the Maydays. His is listen, accept, commit. Commit to the relationship, commit to the scene. Don't say, oh, I'm not in the scene, I'm not sure where it's going. Say, oh, I'm in the scene. You and I are going to go there together. So listen is the thing. And listen is so easy to say and possibly hard to do. And so when people talk about improv and they actually think, oh, well, we all improv. And actually, we all improvise, we all extemporize. But improv has this real discipline. A little bit like a martial art is only when you have failed many times do you become a disciple. Only when you realize that everything is a failure that you realize everything can be a victory. So people say, listen like an improviser, which is I'm listening to you, your words, your body language, and I've trained my brain to do that. And you'll speak to my wife and children. They say, oh, Dad doesn't listen. I'm not perfect. But on stage, I'm in the zone. I am really focused on, and I've emptied my brain of anything else. I don't have any plan of where it's going to go other than you and I will go there together.
So how do you, there's a lot of discussion in your book about leadership and how leaders should lead effectively. How does the laser framework apply to leaders? You talked about listening, but what are some tips for the leaders out there who are listening to this saying, look, how do I use improv to be a better leader? And what is a leader in today's society? It's probably different than what it was 25 years ago, where it was probably a lot more, rules based this way or the highway. I obviously wasn't in the working environment 25 years ago, but I think now things have changed. It's not this way or the highway. It's a much different. The leadership skills in order to be a good leader are probably different than what they were 25 years ago. But you consult with CEOs, the C-suite. You're giving them tips on how to lead. Before we talked, you talked about how to lead a town hall and things like that, where you're trying to present in front of large groups of people. What's your tips for anybody who's a leader out there?
My tips are, you can borrow some improv skills. Listen to your people and listen to your clients. And the best leaders are the ones who encourage the best in their teams. And that sounds a bit like what people call servant leadership, if you like. You're sort of describing 25 years ago, it was, I'm the leader. It was a very male alpha. I'm at the front leading everybody, military, kind of on my horse. Now it's much more non-hierarchical, democratic. And I always, on the other hand, remind leaders that you inhabit a space you didn't create. If you are a leader, you are imprisoned or victim of other people's idea of what a leader should be. Be aware of that.
Yep.
And actually, each moment, each person, each team may need different types of leadership. So my book is called In the Moment. Of course, today and in the book, I celebrate improv and the skills therein. But also, as I said, a moment could be 3 seconds on the stage, you come up with spontaneous, but actually it could be a longer period. In the same way, I remind people that improv has training, has ethos, has rules, if you like, which I call laser. But also, when we do a show, we have structure. We start at 7:30, we finish at 9:30. There's plenty that we've organized. Who's in the show, which games we do. And so I remind leaders that they also have to use some other skills. Not everything is improv, not least when you're presenting. Don't improv. Make a really good speech. Then have a Q&A.
Yeah.
Answer the question, listen to the questions, be sensitive to what's being said. But those are sort of two parts of the brain and body, perhaps. So a leader has to be aware that she or he will, on occasion, have to make a decision that isn't improvised. They have to have some sort of strategy, probably maybe loosely held. They need to set deadlines. They need to understand budgets. And Herminia Ibarra, one of my heroes, she's a professor at London Business School. She talks about you've got to be authentic to your future self in a way. And there are times you've got to make a decision. You've got to inhabit a pair of shoes that maybe you didn't want to. You've got to be not bad cop, but maybe bad cop. Much of a leader's job is making decisions.
Yeah.
In the same way that in an improv scene, you maybe call a day. That's the end of that one. Freeze, let's have another film style. We do have impositions where the initiative is taken. We finish the first half at 8:25, 8:30. There's plenty of structure there. And on the one hand, some leaders are relieved when I say, your job, you're in charge but not in control. Part of your job is about encouraging questions and acknowledging you don't know the answer. But also, and I've got various graphs in my book, where there are times when you actually do know. You've been around, you've done it before. It's okay to say, this is what you do. And I mentioned this amusingly because Google, you think, is kind of fairly laid back and modern. But one of the people there was talking about servant leadership. And I was working this team and how encouraging and yes, and let all the ideas flourish and bring things out from your team and don't be there command and control. And then this guy said, actually, sometimes my team say to me, just tell us what to do. And in the same way that if you have children or you've dealt with children, sometimes they need to be encouraged to find it for themselves. And sometimes you just need to shortcut to this. And luckily, there's some research and some intellectual rigor behind this, which is, there's a guy called Ronald Heifetz at Harvard Business School who talked about adaptive challenges versus technical challenges. Technical is, we've seen this before. You as a leader, you've maybe dealt with it or something like it before. It's okay to say what should be done. adaptive is it's novel, not been done, not been seen before. And these are all over us now with the changing world of AI, hybrid working. And your job is to feel confident enough to say, I don't know. Your job is to curate the question as much as to know the answer. And that ambiguity, that paradox exists, I think, for leaders almost minute by minute, if not hour by hour. When do I step in? When do I step back? And the improv mindset gives you the confidence to understand when improv is needed and how to maintain confidence. Improv is not chaos. Improv is not running away from the problem. Improv is applying a discipline that has been forged on the stage to real life. Just as in scripted theatre, we have rehearsal, we have deadlines, we have first nights, we have props, we have costumes, we have endless repetitions so as to create a robust performance. Your job almost as a leader is to decide when of those two. And the third one is sometimes there is no solution. This is called wicked problems. Your job is to just curate the moments when we don't have a solution. If you do this too quickly, too hard, too fast, then you'll lose some people. So actually it's what the French call bricolage, flea market. You go along, try stuff out, see what happens, experiment. And those three modes of thinking are pretty hard. I don't envy anybody leading because they can't second guess the market. They can't second guess the technological and regulatory changes. All they can do, and a Harvard Business Review article I read years ago was a best state of mind for a leader is humble confidence. Humble, I can't know what's going to happen, but confident that we can cope. Yeah. Instill that in your team and you give them the adaptability that they can face the unusual, but also the humility to know we don't know what will happen, but confident that we have certain things we can rely on, which may be our methods, which may be our team spirit, which may be our history, but it needs to face changing circumstances.
So a big part of your book is talking about working from home, and really what's happened. You know, the work world has been revolutionized as a result of COVID over the last 4 years, let's call it, where working from home is much more acceptable than what it was prior to that date. And your book goes into a number of suggestions and tips on a variety, virtual meetings, how to encourage creativity. But let me just start with one question. Work from home. Your thoughts, good or bad? What do you think? And what do you think is the right? I guess different industries are going to have different views on this, but just your experience is what is the best mix of work from home? So work from home, good or bad? And what's the proper mix between work from home, assuming it's not exclusively one or the other?
My answer is depends. Depends on the person, depends on the moment, depends on the sector. Because you will know, you have friends, colleagues, she loves working from home, she doesn't. They're happy not to. We have our own preferences. Somebody has a 90-minute commute. Do you want them coming in 5 days? Some people love working from home because they can feed the cat, put the washing in, see more of their family. Don't waste carbon by traveling. They can get their head down, get all that stuff done, that busy work. There's others who, even during lockdown, some of my clients were saying, we opened our offices for those people who needed the social contact. Or they didn't have strong Wi-Fi at home, or there was something in their home environment that mitigated against them really getting on with the job. And you have to be sensitive to this. A lot of what I'm seeing is the boss says, we got to do this because that's what he or she wants. And they don't trust those who have a different way of seeing it. And you have to be open to difference. An easy one is to say, work from home Monday, Friday, come into work Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. But what I would say is more robustly, think, why is it we're coming into work? What are we going to do in the office that we didn't do separately? Some people say, I hate Zoom, I hate Teams. I want to be able to see you and smell you and look at your body language. Others say it means fine, I don't have to do my hair. I can wear sneakers or no socks all day. and I can still get on with my job. And it depends on the individual. It depends on the type of work. So make the moments we are face-to-face really worthwhile. And so often people then go into the office and then go into little booths and have meetings on their laptops with each other. Take full advantage of whatever it is. And I would suggest it's creative collaboration that we can enhance when we're face-to-face. On the other hand, make sure that your hybrid or remote meetings are not just task-oriented, boring, not fun. Treat them like an improv show, I would say, which is ask as much as you can from the audience, get as many people involved as you can, use the many platforms, because there's chat, there's slides, there's props. I see a lot of people now giving workshops, webinars using flip charts, not slides, because slides are two-dimensional. We tend to get bored. Moving in and out, standing up to present, make it engaging.
I agree. Neil, here's a good example is that I'm going to be running a meeting in a few weeks with a virtual meeting, 300 to 400 people. And the clip I'm going to start with is your clip from Austin Powers. That is the clip I'm going to start with. And I'm going to say to the group, there's one of 3 people that is going to be coming on the podcast. Can you please, I'm going to put out a poll right now. And I'm going to have everybody guess as to who that person is. Elizabeth Hurley, Mike Myers, or Neil Mullarkey. Because I totally agree with you that there's so many ways that you can make it, you can engage people, you know what I mean? And get them at least like fired up, you know what I mean? And awake, right? So what are your tips on how to run a good, like if you really want to engage people in a Zoom meeting, what are like the 2 or 3 top things to say, look, you should be doing this in order to get them to get them hooked?
First of all, have an agenda. Work out who's doing what, when, and why. What's the meeting for? Is it just to chat? Is it to get some ideas nailed? Is it to assign actions? Who's going to be there? Do we have to have everybody? Does everyone have to be there the whole time? So structure. Make it work so that everyone's done within the allotted time. 40 minutes, make it shorter, half an hour if you can. Can you do it not in a meeting? Can it be a Google Doc? Can it be some other form? Can it be sending a WhatsApp video? Secondly, in the meeting, involve as many people as you can. Don't have one person doing all the talking. Even get stuff like, where are you? Write in the chat, where are you? Well, I'm in Brampton. I'm in London. What have you got on your feet? Just kind of, what happened yesterday? Wasn't it great to hear? Scott's just run a 5K or whatever. Then what does everyone think of this? Everyone put it in the chat whether you think it's a good idea or a bad idea. Suddenly you can have 10 opinions in one go, which in a face-to-face you'd wait 10 iterations. Okay, why do you think that? I see you said yes or 3 out of 5 for this, Scott. Tell me more. So I'm teeing somebody up. They've given an opinion. I've given them a moment to think about what they're going to say so that when they do come on, they're ready. And also for the audience, it's a different voice, a different feel. Get everyone to say something if you can. The sooner you get them to speak, the better, because the longer you wait to say something, the more stress. Oh, well, I haven't said anything. If I've got to wait now until I got something really good, I won't say anything. Say what the weather's like. Talk about the background. What's happening in, there's loads of books and the map of the world behind Scott, I can see. Just stuff like that. Make it fully interactive. Acknowledge you're in your home. Be interested in what's going on. So there's the 2 things. First, structure, agenda, tight, robust. Who's there? Why? What are the inputs? What are the outputs? Then make it human. Make it fun. It's okay to talk about, I just had a cake. Oh, look at my cup of coffee. Getting people involved. Make it humane. Finish on time. If you're clever, you'll say things like, we're going to finish 5 minutes early, actually. But in those 5 minutes, anybody want to say something? You can go now, get early to your next meeting, go have a pee, because so few people have time for a pee between meetings. Go have a cup of coffee or get some fresh air. So make it human, but also make it a little bit more of an agenda than you might for face-to-face, where people roll in and get a bit more information as they roll in. Those are my top tips.
Yeah, and those are, that's incredible advice, Neil, because the other thing that blew my mind when I read your book, which will resonate with probably every person who has ever sat in a meeting, is the number of hours wasted in meetings. Because what you just described is like the must to do for any meetings. And I'll bet you most of the meetings don't do half of what, or a quarter of the things you suggest. And some of the numbers that you have in your book about the number of hours, especially pre-COVID, that people wasted in meetings is almost unbelievable. I saw the number and I said, when you actually roll that up for a year, it's a crazy number. It's insanity how much time people have been spending in meetings.
Billions of dollars.
Yeah, exactly.
And similarly, in bad communication, which could be not letting the person know, telling somebody the stuff they already know. I don't know how much better it is. I remember one stage they were calibrating productivity, which is the amount of time people were online. Is that a measure of productivity? I don't know. The number of emails they send, is that a measure? How are we measuring this? I do think we are a little harder now because we're saying got half an hour for this. It's in your diary. You don't have to waste time moving from one place to another. On the other hand, sometimes that elevator chat along the corridor, perhaps whatever, is vital because you could mutter something which then becomes something really important or is relevant to something that people couldn't say in a meeting. See, I did a whole chapter on meetings, I have to say, because I was writing my chapters of creativity, leadership, collaboration, storytelling, humor, serendipity. And I realized that actually a lot of stuff we do is in meetings. And meetings can be frustrating. And what do we all do? And any of your listeners will know this, which is that, that meeting is terrible. You know, every Monday morning there's Scott's meeting. We all sit there for an hour. It's terrible. And I'm going to say to them, don't blame Scott. Don't blame the other people. You have a responsibility for any meeting you go to say, well, actually, this isn't working. It's a very comfortable thing to go, yeah, I went to that meeting. It was as bad as ever. That's a comfortable place rather than challenge everyone to say, well, how could I make it better? Do we need it to be an hour? Could it be a different day? What's the format? What's the thing we're trying to achieve in this? Just as it was a revelation to me some years ago when people talked about standing up meetings around a table. You know, they're called poser tables, which is like a cocktail.
Yep.
Instead of sitting round and slides and flip charts, you just stand up, which means you don't want it to be that long.
Yep.
So a lot of you might have heard of agile software. It's called a stand-up meeting. In the morning, a scrum, 15 minutes, standing up. It means the energy keeps up. We don't make it too long. We're pretty clear about what it's for. There's somebody in charge who's allotting moments. Go away, come back next day. What have you got up to? Who can help with this? It's a much more dynamic way of having meetings because you clear the point of them rather than we better have a meeting every Monday. We better have this committee meet and actually what's being achieved. Could it be achieved in other ways?
One, I love some of your ideas in your book about, no meetings Tuesday. You know what I mean? And because some people get stressed out about sitting there and saying, I've got to attend this meeting and I've got to get, but if you had a couple of days a week there, you said, look, we can't arrange meetings on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Like, again, what a great idea. Like it changes your whole mindset in terms of how you're approaching things. You mentioned, you talk a lot in your book about creativity. And again, this is another topic that I find really interesting about, when somebody thinks of a certain idea that all of a sudden makes everybody's life easier or thinks of a certain joke or whatever it may be, what actually got them to think about that at that particular moment. What are your thoughts on, working from home versus working in the office and trying to stem and trying to encourage, creativity? Because again, you talk in your book about you might be most creative leaving your house and going and just sitting in the park. You mentioned, there was a famous, I think he was a TV broadcaster or who, that's what he would do, right? Is he would go to the park and just and just sit there and just try and think up ideas. So it raises a question to say, look, are we more creative at home? Are we more creative in the office, or is it someplace in between? What's your perspective on how to really encourage creativity in the workforce?
Well, each of us may find our creativity in different moments. What I do know is if you've got back-to-back Teams meetings, Zoom calls, you're not going to be as creative. But if you want a creative Teams meeting, then get people to stand up, make it fun. Maybe don't do it for too long. Have half an hour, then we'll meet again next week. But also noticing what work is. is work ticking off to-do lists. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's actually giving yourself a window in the day to go for a walk. And there is research to tell us, this is a bizarre one, is that the higher the ceiling, the more creative we are. But how often do we have meetings that are low ceiling, round a board table, fairly unstimulating environments? That's what's interesting to me. My son is back. And the thing about creativity is it often comes when you least expect it. So first of all, write it down when you've had an idea. Sometimes it's collaborative. So different people, oh, there you go. Hello, my son's coming in. Hello, I'm going to take you somewhere else, Scott, okay? I've been a refugee today, so I couldn't go in my office. I couldn't go in the bedroom where I normally go. So I have to go. I'll go to my daughter's bedroom now. Luckily, this is not on camera, is it? So
No, it is not. No.
Okay. So there we go. That's a bit better. How's that looking? I can't see now. Right. So go for a walk, have a swim. But I always say to people, make some time in the day where you're not just thinking about tasks, doing tasks. You need to actually give your brain physically a break. And some people are creative with others. But voluntary solitude is a really powerful thing. Again, I've read lots of research about how good it is sometimes to take some time on your own. Others who find that solitude is not something they would choose would talk differently about that. A lot of people would have creative ideas with others, and also they might want to go to a meeting and have an idea, bring an idea, because nearly every idea in business, in fact, in any line of work, requires other people to move it forward, make it scalable, finish the device, dot the I's and cross the T's. There's plenty of collaboration. So it's not just the lone genius in their garret writing or painting. It's something that does require collaboration. But some people, I know I like to write on my own. I love improvising with an audience, with other actors. Writing is a solitary thing. But then when I've written a certain amount, I can't see anymore. So I have to send it to the editor. So I sent a thing today. I've been asked to write a chapter for a book, and it's supposed to be a certain number of words, and I can't quite get it down, and I can't look at it anymore. I've got to get somebody else to tell me. So collaboration, creativity go hand in hand, but at the right time. And also, I think in my book, I talk about what is creativity, because I think we kind of see it as a niche, as a ghetto, if that isn't too strong a word, but only some people are creative some of the time, rather than creativity is organizing the coffee cups better. It may be coming up with a fantastic new app. It may be just looking in at our meeting schedule. It may be looking again. Fridays could be no emails. It could be we have meetings where we all wear purple.
Yeah.
That can be the element of creativity. It's a broad thing. For me, it's exploring possibilities, and everybody is creative. Everybody, whether they are in a so-called creative job or not.
And so like, you mentioned taking notes. Like, do you walk around with a notepad or your phone and saying, look, if you're sitting in the supermarket or in Walmart or wherever, and you think of something, do you write it down? Like, is that kind of, because the ideas would come and go too, right? Like they would kind of.
Well, of course, every writer will tell you, Roald Dahl, others will have a notebook by the bed, because ideas come to you when you're falling asleep, you just wake up, or as a dream. So I would say keep something with you. I tend to do, I send myself an email.
Okay.
That's my easy way to do it, because I got my phone and I don't want to send too much because it's just a reminder. But I've tried notebooks and I keep, losing them. I've got 300 notebooks with a little bit in. So that will be my thought, is have some way of recording them. A notebook's great. Others will use digital methods, but we do know that creativity comes to you perhaps when you least expect it. You're in the shower, you're driving, you're walking. So have some way of recording it. But St. Augustine said that there isn't a problem that can't be solved by going for a walk, which just means that the research I said about meetings, a low ceiling tends to be a good place to implement ideas. High ceiling, open up ideas, and of course the highest ceiling is the sky. And so,
Yep.
In lockdown, a friend of mine said I used to go for a walk with a friend on FaceTime. Isn't that lovely? And they'd show that the phone would show where they're going, not their own face. So it was kind of, we're going for a walk together, even remotely. So you can see there are great advantages in the acceptance now of working from home or working not from the office, whatever that means. I mean, isn't it great? I can speak to you in a different time zone, different continents.
Absolutely.
And I don't know, I have done that before lockdown, but now we have this wonderful possibility. I don't have to spend time flying to see you, and we can access all sorts of joyous stuff. There were lots of improv troupes giving improv classes across the world during lockdown.
Yep.
A friend of mine is a yoga teacher. He had people coming in from Japan. It's just, these are the upsides of this world. So I would say always look, what is it you want to achieve, face-to-face or remote? What's the best way of doing it? And also looking after yourself. People who value social interaction, make sure you find it. People who need solitude, make sure you slot it into the day. Even I say, put in Project Rainbow or something, Project Mullarkey, where your colleagues may not know, or your assistant might know, that's what they do. They can't be interrupted. And it's a very important thing. Otherwise, the only time you get to think is when you're at home, and perhaps you should be focused on whatever that happens at home.
The other part of your book that I really enjoyed was when you talk about laughter. And, you get into some questions that I'd never thought about before about the science of laughter, about what actually makes somebody laugh. Like, that's not a question I actually thought about before, but it certainly is an interesting question, like that actually the science or the psychology behind what actually makes somebody laugh. You talk about when you're giving a joke versus receiving a joke, what is actually better for you, and receiving a joke and laughing is better than actually. So again, you got into these topics that frankly, I've never even really thought about them, but they were really cool to actually just think about in my own mind as to, how they play out. But what I want to ask you about is the importance of laughter at work. And why is that so important? And I guess it probably does relate to the science of laughter and why that is so important. But maybe just give your perspective on why laughter is so important. Like, why is it an important element of a good working environment?
Well, when you're laughing together, you're communing in a more profound way or deeper way than just working together. Now, I would first of all say a lot of people think laughing is not working. Laughing is somehow avoiding work. Laughing can be aggressive because we're laughing at personal. Some people are laughing and some aren't. So for me, beware of what I would call bullying, which is pointing at others and saying, they're not like us. They're not in our gang. For me, the best laughter is the one where you go, oh, yeah, of course. That's me. Oh, yes. Isn't the world strange? The best leaders for me are not, they're allowing laughter. They don't have to be the joke maker. The worst thing I would say if you take away from this topic is I've got to go find some joke books. No, don't do that. Just allow moments of humor to emerge. And you don't have to be the joke teller. But of course, there's all sorts of research, which is why I think I said earlier about in the personal ads in the magazines, GSOH, good sense of humor. Why do we want that? Well, it turns out that when we laugh together, we're more relaxed. It's good for our bellies. It's good for our oxygen. It's a uniting thing. If I can find something we laugh together at, we have moments later that we're not laughing, we're angry. But if we've got that basis of trust and common perspective on something, then we'll work better together. It doesn't mean you have to kind of force it into the daily work life. I think you have to allow it and find moments, and also wonder. And this is a thing that I've been banging on for a while. Is we talk about our 10,000 steps and our 5 a day fruit and veg. Are we checking we're having enough laughter? Is there a laughter audit individually and as a team? Are we laughing enough? Because we know it's good for our body. We know it's good for our psychology. And even at the very basis, the Mayo Clinic, I quote in the book, just go watch some TV or something. It makes you laugh. It's good for you. Even better if you can feel you can laugh in the environment. Certainly we know that at funerals, when we laugh, it feels okay. When we celebrate that person we've lost, it feels okay, just as we need to cry on some occasions. So anyway, there's lots of science about your body reacts well. There's dopamine and feel-good chemicals associated with laughter and other things. So if we're doing it together, so much the better. Affiliative humor, I call it, which is the laughter that brings us together, where we share our common humanity. And a leader who says, oh, remember that time, and we laugh about it. And the leader who can carefully say, I made a mistake and now I can laugh about it, is fine. Too much, the leader's doing bad jokes and saying, I'm rubbish, aren't I terrible, is going too far. Yeah. But where are we going to go, look at something, and the humorist says, take another perspective on it. We laugh. It's kind of like gallows humor. We know that plenty of people in the caring professions, when the moment is right, they can laugh together, which makes them feel more human, which means they can deal with the most stressful situations. And also, there's a book called Humor Seriously, by the way, by an improviser and a Stanford professor. Humor Seriously. And the sense of using a smile. It doesn't have to be a big laugh, a guffaw. It's just a little thing at the end of an email. P.S. How's the cheese? Just a smile. They say not necessarily hilariously funny, but appropriate.
So I need you to. So my next question is when is laughter not appropriate? And we're going to share a story here, Neil, and you can weigh in. What I'd like you to do is weigh in on your perspective and provide a third party view on because this is something that recently happened to me. And I'd like to just get your perspective on whether you think the humor was inappropriate in this circumstance. So it was something that happened quite recently within the last couple of weeks. We're working on a project and there's some difficult news that has to be communicated. And there's a call lined up for 6 p.m. on a Sunday evening, which is not, people are probably in a work perspective. Yeah, you got yes, it's people are going to be grumpy when they join at 6 p.m. So I join the call and the CFO joins the call and the CEO's a few minutes late. So the CFO says right off the top, the news is not great. And I just started laughing right off the bat. I had to appreciate her honesty as a result of that. Like she's not trying to sugarcoat it. She's saying right off the bat, the news is not great. And then all of a sudden the CEO joins the call and he doesn't know what call he's actually joined because he's sitting there thinking this is going to be a difficult conversation. And all of a sudden, you've got these people laughing on the phone, thinking he's spending Sunday night at your improv club. So he's wondering what's going on. And then what I started to say was, I said, okay, well, we've got a difficult situation, like you're saying. You know what I said? I just did this podcast with one of the other senior leaders within CSI, and he was sharing a story of that was. When he made a mistake and it was really funny. And then I probably made the mistake at the end of saying, you know what? And it is a must listen. You must listen to it. And the response from the CEO was, save your jokes for your podcast, Scott. We need to talk about this. We need to talk about this situation. And as I was thinking afterwards, Neil, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't have went to the humor in that situation, difficult conversation where we want to get to the facts. What's your perspective on that? Are you leaning towards like Team Scott on that one, or is it more like Team CEO? Was the humor kind of a little too much? Is there situations where you need to temper down the humor?
Yes. Who knows? You had to read the person.
See, and there was no cameras on. That was the problem too, Neil, is that there was no
Right,
cameras
yeah,
on. It was
okay.
just, and I couldn't read body language at that point. That's why I like the
Yeah,
camera.
well, there you go. That's another of my tips. Cameras on. Cameras on, so I can see what's going on. My advice would generally be only tread into humor gently, one bit at a time. See what's happening. If somebody says something, try something out. I wouldn't go 3 steps into the marsh. I would dip a toe in.
I see.
And I would say if you can't see their face, you don't quite know the story. It's impossible to tell. And also, I would generally, my humor isn't jokes. It isn't several sentences of me saying something which culminates in a punchline. It tends to be, how are things today with you? Fine. Oh, I see in your background there's a thing going on. Yeah. So, okay. So you don't necessarily go for a big laugh straight away. You're not trying to ascend Everest straight away. You're just
Yes.
testing the foothills. That would be my advice.
That's good advice. That's very
Yeah.
good. Very good advice that I will take into it. The next time I have a call, it's at 6 p.m. at dinner time on a Sunday when people are in a grumpy mood. I think I will take a different tack. Now the call did go well. It did. We did recover from that from the outset, but yeah. So Neil,
On the
maybe
other hand, the CEO could feel good by telling you off. Maybe he felt, okay, that's fine. I've done my job. I put Scott in his place.
Exactly.
He's wasting his time doing this podcast. That's fine. Maybe it was fine.
Yeah.
And maybe it also helped the others go, okay, that's the tone. We'll stick with that. The thing is, for me, any human interaction is a dynamic, fluid situation. So yeah, my advice would generally be go slowly. Try something out, see what happens. That's not your first move, it's your third move. And then don't do anything that requires a big laugh. Just to smile and then see where we get to.
Got it. So, when Neil Mullarkey were to come out and consult with the groups, how does a Neil Mullarkey training session typically go? Because you talk a lot about in your book about how you interact with business people and how a Neil Mullarkey training session would go in the laser framework. But when you go out and do an assignment, how do you start? What does it generally look like, and what are you hoping to achieve at the end of it all?
Well, I generally get a call or an email or something from somebody, come and do this thing with these people. So I say, good, I can do that date. Can you afford me? Okay. Now, what's your objective? Why? Why me? Why them? Okay, good. Well, we want them to loosen up. We want them to work better as a team. We want them to be more creative. It's a leadership group. So this week I'm doing one with people from an ad agency, so sort of medium people who are a little bit shy about speaking up with the client. They don't want to be put on the spot. They're data people, but if there's something that's not in the data, they don't know how to roll with the punches and riff. Well, maybe this, try that. And actually the data is telling us this story. And when the client says, well, I don't agree, or tell me more, and they go, oh, I'm panicking. So just confidence in the moment. Okay, when do they do this? Oh, is it 5 people around a board table? Is it virtual? Is it face-to-face? Is it 500 people? No. Is it people internally, externally? Great. So they're experts in what? Okay, good. They're good at this. They're not so good at that. Right. Okay. When did they have to stand up and do this? No. Well, actually, as leaders, they're pretty good technically. It's the other thing now that as leaders, they have to be less technical. They have to be more people. So good. Fine. Right. We got the day, shall we say. Right. Everyone come, coffee, 9:30. We'll start at 10. And often I do it at the Comedy Store, by the way, which is a lovely place.
Oh, wow.
It's my home.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
So I sometimes do it on site. Obviously, for Scott, I will come to do it in Brampton at the very poshest hotel you can find. But so it's kind of, we start at 10. I've got to know them a few. I tend to write up the names of everybody. So that helps me learn their names, which to me is a big deal. Then I go and meet them at coffee and, okay, I've learned a few names. Then everyone sit down. Okay. And I introduce what I do. You've come to the Comedy Store. You've come wherever. I'm from comedy. Don't worry. I'm not going to make you do stand-up. Okay. Really? Yes. It's improv. It's all about listening. Anyone seen an improv show? It's 3 people or whatever. Maybe. I see on TV. I saw a show. I saw my friend did it, a course. Right. It's this form of theater started in Chicago with children. giving them confidence. Right. So generally, I'm trying to get them to think it's not about performance. It's not about being funny. It's not about showing off. It's actually about how we relate to one another. And so some very simple games. It may be even they just sit and shut their eyes and I guide them on a journey. So they improvise the journey, but in their head. I'm saying you're walking down a road. Everyone got a different road in their head. We find out what was the road later. And look, wasn't it great, that diversity? I just said, I'm walking down a road. She saw one by the seaside. He saw one where he was this morning. They saw one from their childhood. Allowing diversity. Get the idea of, I gave an offer and you listened, accepted, and sent one back, but in your own head. Then we do a game, a one-word story. I went to the zoo, that kind of thing. That's fun because as soon as we say zoo, you're thinking elephant. She's thinking giraffe. He's thinking my favorite zoo. Somebody else is thinking I don't like zoos. Again, that diversity, that perspective, but also at some point, the one-word story, we want to make it a good story. What happened at the zoo? Did they win? Did they lose? What did they find? Was there jeopardy? Talk a lot about the idea of offers. Introduce the idea of an offer is something somebody gives you, you can do something with. In a conversation, somebody uses a word or the way they speak. That's an offer. Oh, that's an offer. Accept that offer. That's how they're expressing themselves. Let me send something back that acknowledges their sense, their perception. We do a yes and game. I'm going to the shops. Yes, and I'd like some cheese. Yes, and I'll make a cheese sandwich. Yes, and I'll make an omelette. Yes, and then we can have dessert. Yes, and I'll go buy some. Yes, and maybe we could have a picnic if you're making a sandwich. So we build one at a time. Get used to the idea of yes and, try yes but. All the time I'm also thinking, well, how do you do this in your real life? Is it you're in the marketing team, you've got to get more yes and relations with sales? Are you in compliance and you've got to get sales to be on your side? You're working with clients, so it's an external thing. We might look at some role play where I do it like forum theatre, where actually, if it's Scott telling me about this conversation he's got coming up, he tells me, he tells somebody else, and we act it out, and Scott watches his story being played out. Scott doesn't play himself, which is a nice thing because you realize, oh, right, the way you're saying it isn't the way I would say it. Really? But I'm doing what you said. But even just that nuance of different people interpreting the same environment, same facts, the same relation in different ways is quite fun. We might do some storytelling. We might do some body language. How do I make the impression which I want to? Because if I'm talking like this and I'm telling you about how I'm so excited about this project, it's going to be really great. I don't believe you. So tell me a story about something you care about. And of course, then people come to life. I was out there sailing. I was with my friends. I met this beautiful person and we're together now. They have energy. They have vitality. Okay, now tell me about your project. Well, we're doing this thing. We have some spreadsheets. Eventually, maybe we'll come up with an idea. It's going to really be exciting. Okay, why aren't you bringing that same energy? Is it because you're nervous, you don't know the story, or you don't care? So just things like that about my world of theatre. The improv theatre, which is making stuff in the moment. Sometimes I may even, if we're thinking about, I do a thing called Enrich Your Pitch, which is bring a 60-second pitch. So that's scripted. And of course, most people have failed to script it. We record it, sometimes TV. They watch themselves on videos. Oh, no, I was terrible. I was slow, bumbling, looking down. I wouldn't buy a second-hand car from myself. Then we work on that, do some storytelling, some body language. Then by the end of the day, they might redo their 60-second pitch. We film it and say, look at that. Look at your feet. Look at your body. Hear your voice, which now is full of vitality. So it varies whether we're focusing on interpersonal or leadership or creativity, teamwork. Sometimes people come and say, we just spent the whole day laughing. We don't do that at work. And I think I've done my job.
Absolutely.
That person who you thought was a bit shy, look at the way she's come out. Look at that person. You thought he was just this. And now you've seen a whole different side to him, to her. Wow, I've done my job. Often when I've done a pitching workshop, somebody says, that person was so good. We now send them out on the pitch, and we hadn't before because they seem to nail it. When you gave them a permission, you gave them a structure, which I tend to do. They could do it. They could tell the story. They were okay with the questions and answers, and we wouldn't have found it had we just gone in for our normal hierarchy of who does this stuff.
Well, you're teaching a framework, right? Like if you think about any skill out there, it takes practice, no matter what it is, right? Like nobody is going to pick up something unless you're kind of like a freak of nature. No one's going to pick up something and be an expert off the bat. And the reality is most skills can be learned, right? So, you talk a lot in your book about introverts, right? You'll never be, if you like to be an introvert, you'll never be, an extrovert at like 150%, but you could probably build up a skill set to, like you say, take those elements of work that require extroverted skills and at least practice them and work on it and demonstrate it, and maybe even demonstrate it better than an extrovert who's a natural extrovert. Because if they're not prepared and they're not ready to roll, and you are, you're going to do a better job than the other person, right?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
and teaching that that's what I loved about your book is the prep involved. Improv is not spur of the moment. There's actually a lot of prep that goes into it. It just, you guys are so good at it that it's you don't notice it. You know what I mean? Like it's that's part of the trick.
Yeah, I'm just reading something about learning. Spaced repetition. You ask anybody, music, theater, repeat it again, go away from it, come back, repeat it, and you get better each time.
Absolutely.
It isn't the first practice you're great. And also you don't give up if you're not great after the third practice. You have a go. You try the difficult bit. You work on the bit that's harder. You ease the transition between act one and act two or whatever. Spaced repetition. And so improv is that. It isn't just having the confidence to make nonsense up. Extrovert, introvert, I don't really know anymore how to define those. I think I'm happier with extrovert, tends to be one happier in amongst people. Introvert needs some time on their own, because most performers would tend towards being introverts. What I mean by that is that off stage, they don't know how to relate to people. They know how to relate to 1,000 people on screen or in an audience, but they're talking to somebody they don't know. They're a bit shy.
Yeah.
They don't know where to start. And so these are harder to quantify. And many people in the public eye, many chief executives, leaders are introverts, but they've learned some skills, some tricks, so they can do it in front of an audience. I would count myself an introvert because I get energy from being on my own, but I make a living from being in front of people. But I do things like during the lunch break, I go and hide. When we finish, I take a long walk. And this was in lockdown, tough, because I'd finish my workshop and go down straight to my family. And I had to be that person again. And that separation was harder for me. So I need to decompress after a show, after a workshop, because I give a lot of myself. So I make sure I get an early night before the show, before a workshop. I get there early. I set my stuff up and then go and sit quietly in the corner. And I noticed some non-professional speakers. I met the wonderful Brene Brown once, and I saw lots of people come up to talk to her before her thing. And I just gently, at some point, I said, just come and sit down, Brene. You need a moment for yourself. And she said, thank goodness. I didn't know how to express that. I said, well, you have to. For the rest of the audience, you can't be giving away too much of yourself, because when you're on stage, you want to give 100%. So I always say, when presenting, pitching, whatever, make sure that beforehand you're resting, you're focused, you're not filling your mind up with too much stuff. And then afterwards, it's stressful. Give yourself a break. Give yourself a cup of tea, go for a walk. Because too many people say, well, I've got back-to-back meetings, especially on Teams or Zoom. Yeah, I've got that thing where I'm up to be a partner or director. That's my big interview. Then I've got meetings afterwards. No.
Yeah.
Because in the meeting where you have to give 100%, you're thinking, I've got 3 more meetings. I'll give 50%. Whereas I give everything. And sometimes people say the biggest insight was when I said, I'm going to have a lie down after this. I'm going to have a bath. I made sure that in the hour preceding this session, nobody talked to me. I made myself scarce because I knew the adrenaline would need to rush and I needed to be at my best in those moments. So introvert, extrovert, anybody can do this stuff. And I've seen many extroverts fail because they haven't prepared.
That's great advice. I totally agree. And you talk in your book as well about energy levels, right? And about, like you say, you know, getting yourself mentally prepared for that moment, giving it all, and then afterwards you're drained. Like it's not like you ran a marathon. It's not that type of drained, but it's a different type of drained, right? So, but Neil, we could talk forever. We're already over time here. Again, I just wanted to thank you very much for your time today. We very much appreciate it. Highly recommend people go and read the book. In the moment, you will walk away with many, many things that you can apply in your everyday work life. Give Neil a call. I'm sure he'll be more than happy to help you out as well. You talk through a typical workshop, which is completely unique. Like I've never heard of anything like that. Very, very cool. But Neil, again, on behalf of CSI, thank you very much for your time. We very much appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. Lovely to meet you. And one day I hope to meet you in person.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you, Neil.